Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you're joining us from around the world. Thank you again for joining the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs Daily War Room Update. We're going to start. I'm Maurice Hirsch, and welcome everybody. I'm joined today by my esteemed colleagues, by Yoni ben Menachem and by Pinhas Inbari. We will go through the regular presentation for the start of the briefing, and then we will move on from there. As I say every day at the moment, we're talking about the massive onslaught, terrorist onslaught that started on the 7th of October 2023. Over 3,000 terrorists from Gaza, from Hamas, Palestinian Liberation Front, the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Fatah, the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades, and another whole group of different other terrorist groups, 12 in number, from the Gaza Strip, infiltrated Israel. They raided 30 different civilian sites, including cities, towns, villages, kibbutzim, and army bases. They literally, just like in the Middle Ages, they raped, pillaged, murdered, decapitated babies, decapitated other people. They kidnapped old people. They murdered old people. They kidnapped the sick. They kidnapped disabled people. Really a display of depraved barbarism that the world hasn't seen for a very long time. And this is an ISIS-like action and cannot be differentiated. We ended that day with 1,400 people, more than 1,400 people murdered. Excuse me, over 5,200 injured. Some of those people, as I say every day, still fighting for their lives in hospital. Unfortunately, the number of deaths keeps on growing as we go along. The terrorists also kidnapped a substantial number of people. It's believed that it's over 250 people. The confirmed number has gone up by one since yesterday, from 222 to 223. What happens is that every day that the security forces and intelligence forces can confirm the identity of another person, so they inform the families of those people that their loved ones have actually been, they're not killed, but they have been kidnapped into Gaza. Sometimes they've been killed in Gaza as well. At the same time, we've seen massive barrages of rockets being fired at Israel. Since the 7th of October, over 7,850 rockets have been fired in Israel. Some of them still being fired today. Just an hour before we started this broadcast, the terrorists in Gaza fired rockets for a new destination towards Eilat, towards Hevel Elot, the southern area of Israel, which has been less of a focus for them until now. Yesterday, as we mentioned, they just fired a huge barrage into Israel's main civilian area on the coastal plain. We're talking about also hundreds of rockets, of these rockets that have fallen within the Gaza Strip, killing at least hundreds of people, if not more, civilians killed by the terrorists themselves. So that's at the moment the southern area from the terrorist side. From the Israeli side, Israel is continuing to attack the terrorist infrastructure and the terrorists themselves, eliminating targeted killings of a number of serious terrorists just in the last 24 hours. In total, according to an IDF publication that I saw just published literally just a few minutes before our broadcast, there have been some 10,000 strikes of Hamas and terrorist targets in the Gaza Strip since the 7th of October. There are so many strikes because there are so many targets. The terrorists have implanted themselves into the civilian, into the urban environments, spreading their assets everywhere, spreading rockets everywhere, spreading the ammunition everywhere. So unfortunately, there are a substantial amount of targets to get through. Israel has also continued on with our operations in Judea and Samaria. Also on that front, fighting, it's the same, the terrorists there. It's Hamas, Gaza, Hamas, Judea and Samaria, Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria, PFLP in both areas, Since the 7th of October, Israel has arrested, according to the IDF this morning, 930 terrorists that have been arrested in Judea and Samaria alone. The level of terror there is at a constantly high level, with constant attempts by the terrorists to obviously support their terrorist friends in Gaza and carry out also large-scale attacks in Judea and Samaria. What we're seeing from the north, Lebanon, on the Lebanese border, we've had a constant flow of tit for tat. The Lebanese firing anti-tank missiles into Israel. Israel responding. Also, there we saw just at 12:30 this afternoon, Israel and the IDF eliminating a group of terrorists, of Hezbollah terrorists, who were preparing to shoot another anti-tank missile. That has happened all the way along. Last night we had an interesting terminology. I apologize. Another development in this terror war, with rockets being fired also from Syria, and then the IDF responding by attacking terrorist targets also in Syria. On the wider scale, we're still seeing the constant involvement of Iran in this developing situation. We're seeing cyber attacks, which could only have been, at least the estimation is that it could only have been developed by state actors, being conducted in all types of areas and in all types of spheres. Obviously, this adds on to the rockets that Yoni mentioned yesterday, for those of you who were with us, fired by the Houthis in Yemen just last week. And today there was an interesting comment. Yoni, maybe you can also develop on this, and then we'll also after that we'll launch also into our conversation with Pinhas. With Pinhas today, we're going to be discussing. Pinhas is a veteran Arabist with really close sources all over the Arab world. We're going to be discussing with Pinhas a little bit about what's going on in the Arab world. What are they talking about? What are they thinking? The Arabs in Israel, the Arabs in Judea and Samaria. To what extent, I don't know. We'll see in a minute to what extent Pinhas has connections also in Gaza to understand what's going on, and also in Lebanon. Between Yoni and Pinhas, I think we have probably the best team to cover the Arab world that anyone could really want, the champions team. Yoni, Pinhas, the comment that I heard this morning was that one of the from ostensibly from an IDF source, that one of the Houthi rockets, the Iranian proxy Houthi rockets that was fired last week towards Israel, was actually shot down by Saudi Arabia. That's something that I heard being reported this morning.
It's not a rocket; it's a missile.
A missile. Sorry, a missile.
There's a difference between a rocket and a missiles, and the Houthis have missiles that can reach up to 2,000 kilometers. That means that the south of Israel is the range of the Houthis, and this report is true. This was really intercepted by the Saudis, one of them. The rest were intercepted by the American Army, American Navy. If I may...
Can I just interrupt you for just 1 second for one last comment, Yoni, and then we'll move on. I'll get back to you immediately. Obviously, the last comment that needs to be made on this very tense day in Israel and around the world is, and we can't not mention it, was the disgraceful comments made yesterday by the Secretary General of the UN, saying that the terrorist attack, the butchering, the murder, the slaughter, burning people, decapitating people, was, in the words of the Secretary General, not carried out in a vacuum. This disgraceful explanation and justification of these barbarous acts is something which will remain a stain on the UN, I fear, forever, and was just another expression of the UN's hostility towards Israel. This at a time when the victims of the families who have been kidnapped, or the families of the victims who have been kidnapped and are now in Gaza, were speaking at the UN. The Secretary General was unfortunately not listening to their pain, but was rather supporting the terrorists and justifying their actions. So that's something that has to be mentioned along the way. And now on that really horrible note, back to you, Yoni, to fill in the reports, please.
Okay, so I want to talk about where we stand today in the battle against Hamas, ISIS in Gaza Strip, while the Israeli Air Force keeps striking and attacks on Gaza. Large forces of the IDF are waiting on the border with the Gaza Strip. They are waiting for the green light from the political echelon to carry out the ground attack in order to eliminate the military infrastructure of Hamas and to kill the military leadership, which is hiding in the tunnels underground. The terror organizations, Hamas and Islamic Jihad, they keep launching rockets towards Israel, and also they are continuing to try and infiltrate into Israeli territories through land and through the sea in order to commit more atrocities and massacres. Last night, the naval commander of Hamas tried to infiltrate through the sea to Zikim area in the south, but the IDF was on high alert and succeeded to thwart this attack and killed a few terrorists of Hamas. This is a failure for Hamas, and this is very important that the IDF regain the control on the border with Gaza Strip. From what we hear from the political echelon, the political echelon is determined to give the order to the IDF for a ground attack in Gaza. It looks that this military operation will be delayed for a few days by the request of the American administration, by President Biden, who asked Netanyahu to give more time for another possible prisoner deal, exchange of prisoners or releasing of prisoners. It's not clear yet between Hamas and Qatar. Israel is not involved in the negotiations. These negotiations are done by the United States and Qatar, between Qatar and Hamas. A few hours ago, the Prime Minister of Qatar announced that there is a breakthrough in the negotiations. So we'll have to see whether this is true and whether more prisoners, more captives will be released. I want to talk about the meaning of the ground invasion of the IDF, the expected ground invasion into Gaza, and what the IDF plans to do there. There's no doubt that the ground invasion of the IDF to Gaza will not be easy. We are talking about very populated areas, a lot of buildings, a lot of houses, and a lot of Hamas forces which are equipped with rockets and missiles, anti-tank missiles, anti-tank, and this is very, very dangerous for the IDF. Fighting in an urban area is not easy for any army. Of course, also for the IDF, the Hamas have been preparing for years for this ground attack of the IDF in Gaza, and we see now in the last few days they're trying to also manipulate and use different tactics of psychological warfare in order to try and deter the IDF from this operation. The heads of the terror wing of Hamas, Mohammed Deif and Yahya Sinwar, they know very well that if the IDF will go into Gaza, they will break the power of the military wing of Hamas and eliminate it. So they're trying to gain time and stall the Israeli army. The Israeli government in the last few years, from 2007, from the year that Hamas made a coup d'etat in the Gaza Strip and kicked out the Palestinian Authority and took over Gaza by force, the Israeli government allowed Hamas to accept hundreds of millions of dollars from Qatar, which is very hostile. And also they allowed into Gaza large amounts of cement and iron, supposedly to renovate and rehabilitate the infrastructure that was destroyed in the different rounds of fighting that were happening in Gaza since Hamas took power in Gaza. But this was all a deception, and these amounts of cement and iron and also the money, all of this was used to build the underground, what the army calls the metro, or the tunnels that are underground under the city of Gaza, which extend to about 100 kilometers. This is the estimation of the IDF. And this is something which is very dangerous to Israel. In those tunnels, the captives, these more than 200 captives, Israeli captives, are held there in custody, and also in this big metro under the Gaza city, they're hiding thousands of armed terrorists, and they have there the warehouses for the thousands of rockets, and also the workshops to manufacture rockets and drones. So the big challenge of the IDF is to demolish all this system of tunnels and try to release the captives, the hostages. There are some advisors of the American administration who were involved in fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, who are giving advice to the IDF to refrain from a wide ground operation in Gaza, and to attack Hamas in another way, airstrikes from the air, and also raids on specific targets of Hamas in Gaza. But senior officers in the IDF say that it is impossible to destroy the military, the huge military infrastructure of Hamas without going in with the full forces, with a wide spread army operation in Gaza. The big threat for the IDF in Gaza will definitely be the tunnels of Hamas, and the military wing commanders of Hamas are using encrypted communications, and they booby-trapped all the tunnels with big explosives and preparing ambushes for the IDF. This is what the Israeli intelligence is saying. The IDF has experience in destroying tunnels. In the war in 2014 in Gaza, the IDF destroyed 32 tunnels, but the IDF does not have an experience in fighting face-to-face inside the tunnels with the terrorists of Hamas. The IDF has intelligence about the tunnels of Hamas, and also a few dozens of the terrorists that were arrested by the IDF after they went into the Israeli communities on the border with Gaza. In the interrogation, they gave intelligence information to the Shin Bet about what is happening in the tunnels and where the ambushes are, but we can expect that Hamas changed its plans. The IDF will also use some technological means or systems to locate tunnels. The question is if this will be enough to overcome this big obstacle and demolish the tunnels. This is a big question we cannot know right now. The Achilles heel of these tunnels is that they need electricity in order to operate the ventilation system. They cannot stay for long in the tunnels without ventilation, and for this they need electricity. This is why Israel must stop any supply of fuel, gasoline, whatever, to Gaza Strip, because this will go to the Hamas, and in order that they can keep hiding in the tunnels and have ventilation and have oxygen. So this is something that we have to take into consideration, because if the IDF will behave smartly, we can turn these tunnels into a death trap for these hiding terrorists, thousands of terrorists that are hiding there. We'll see how the IDF will operate. The IDF also has a special unit that is dealing with tunnels. This is something that have been in the IDF for a few years, but they were talking about 1,000 soldiers only. This is not enough to fight these terrorists in the tunnels. The IDF will have to be creative and find new ways to deal with this big threat of the tunnels in the Gaza Strip. Thank you.
Thanks, Yoni, for that comprehensive explanation. I think among the very many important points that you made there, I think that the point about the importance and the vital importance of electricity and the ability to keep the flow of electricity to Hamas and its tunnels for the ventilation system and everything else down there is absolutely critical. It makes the stopping of electricity of all kinds and also the reduction of fuel an absolute military imperative. That's something which obviously has very important ramifications also when it comes to the nature of the humanitarian aid that Israel is required and should allow to go into the Gaza Strip. From there, we'll go maybe on now to Pinhas. Pinhas, we know what's going on in Israel. We know that Israel, after a period of political turmoil and a little bit of division, and not a small amount of division even, has seen really limitless unity over the last 2.5 weeks, of the last 17 days. That's on the Israeli side. Even to an extent on the Israeli Arab side, we've seen less violence than very much less violence to almost none compared to the events of May 2021. What's going on in the minds of the Arab populations around us? Let's go a little bit around the globe. Let's start, if I may, with Israel. From there, move on to Lebanon, down to the Judea and Samaria, and then as much as you can tell us about what's going on in Gaza. I just saw pictures of, for example, of whilst Gaza City is predominantly destroyed, Khan Yunis appears to be still in quite a good state, with people going about their daily business. So what's going on? And give us that picture, please.
Okay. When we are talking about Hamas, ISIS, we must go back to the war in Syria. What we saw in the war in Syria, we saw a pan-Arabism fighting a pan-Islam. When we compare it to our situation, we can say that Hamas is pan-Islam, while Fatah is pan-Arabism. Daesh is a third party which broke the rules of the game and committed atrocities no less than Hamas ISIS. When we compare Hamas ISIS to Daesh, there is not much difference. Hamas is not worse than Daesh. Daesh was worse enough. They killed and tortured Muslims. They blasted mosques and holy sites. They burned crucified Christians on the crosses. And they, of course, beheaded people, prisoners and others. And they used the Yazidis as living targets for snipers. So when the Muslims in Israel and around the world saw Daesh, ISIS, coming back from the dead in Gaza, they were alarmed and panicked, because Daesh is not only, by the way, in Syria and Iraq, Daesh was not against Israel. Astonishing, not against Israel. And this neutrality of Daesh vis-a-vis Israel astonished many Europeans. And they asked me, please explain to us why Daesh is against us and not against you. But this time Daesh is against us. But everybody understands that the real target of Daesh is not the Jews, it's the Christians and other Muslims who do not think like them. And we saw how they treated the Fatah guys when they overtook Gaza. They threw them from the roofs to their death. And we rescued Fatah. So when the Israeli Arabs understood that we are not talking here about the liberation of Palestine or ending the occupation and all those old slogans, but it's a threat coming to us and them, they did not meet the calls of Muhammad Deif to go to riots like in 23. They understood that this is a different story now. And by large, the Israeli Arabs are quiet and they behave more or less normal. And I think that the police commissioner, Shabtai, when he said that today they are behaving like a model, not like a model because there are exceptions, but by large, they do not pose a danger on Israel like what Muhammad Deif was planning to. There are exceptions, and we must be aware of the exceptions. First of all, there is in the triangle the Raed Salah guys, the Jabarin gang. They prepare to launch an attack on the kibbutzim in Emek Israel. And they were photoed preparing for that, exactly like Daesh Gaza. We must keep an eye on them. And we must beware of surprises coming from this side. There is the leftist intelligentsia in the north, in Haifa and Nazareth. They identify themselves with the Ba'ath and the leftist Marxism, George Habash, Naif Hawatmeh, etc. I do not expect them to be violent like the Harak al-Fahmawi group in the triangle, but they can poison the atmosphere between Jews and Arabs in Israel. They also must be checked. The big surprise, positively, are the Bedouins in the Negev. I would like to remind you that they were the trigger in 23 that started the riots in the Negev and in the mixed cities, Lod and Ramla. This time, they want to volunteer to the efforts of rescue. And I see on Twitter, they want to mobilize themselves to the police.
Pinhas, do you think that's a result of the fact that they were also the victims of the attacks? Bedouin, who at the same time, there's a story that I heard this morning in the Knesset of a Bedouin who was in one of these safe blocks by the Nature Party, and there were some half a dozen people inside. He went outside, explained to the terrorists that he is an Arab, that inside were only his family and they didn't have to do anything. And he tried to stand up when everyone else were coming to kill everyone. He went outside with an amazing display of courage, trying to save the Jews that were hiding. A whole family that was murdered, mother, father, children. Do you think that is why the Israeli Arab community has been less militant this time?
It is one of the reasons. But before this, I was engaged with projects in Rahat, in the Negev, and I discovered there is the process of Israelization among the Bedouins in the Negev. And really, I don't know why, because the crime families are very strong among them. And maybe this is the reason, because I understood that the only hope for them to have safe society is to be engaged with Israel. Because if they are left alone, they will be overruled by the crime gangs. And I think this is what triggered the process of Israelization among the Bedouins in the Negev. Now, Hamas is targeting also the Bedouins in the Negev as enemies. And for Hamas, the fact that they are Muslims and Arabs and they are loyal citizens in Israel created a label against them that they are traitors and they must be treated as traitors. And what is happening these days is kind of a game change in the Negev when the Bedouins will stay with Israel because they know what is the alternative. This is very surprising. I did not expect this result, but when we distinguish the three parts of Israel, we can say the Bedouins are the most forthcoming to become part of Israel now. We have problems in the triangle with Raed Salah guys, but also we have to remember that Mansour Abbas, who was the only politician in Israel from all the series of politicians that stood firmly against the atrocities of Hamas and say this is not Islam. All the other politicians like Ahmad Tibi and the others, they compared, yes, also Palestinian children are killed in Gaza, and much like Guterres. They did not stand all out against Hamas, but not just defined like Guterres, but balanced, gave a balance. They are bad guys and we are bad guys, okay? So not like Mansour Abbas. And now I see in the latest poll of the Hebrew University that 50% of Israeli Arabs are supporting Mansour Abbas. And I believe, because I know the popularity of Mansour Abbas in the Negev is higher than the rest of the country, I think that most of the Bedouins in the Negev are supporting Mansour Abbas, and the 50% of the Israeli Arabs are coming from the Negev. This is my opinion. So we have the Negev, the most forthcoming to identify themselves with Israel. We have the triangle that we have to keep an eye because it may be violent and make surprise attacks on us, and we must be very careful about it. And we have the intelligentsia in the north. The leftist intelligentsia that may poison the relations between Jews and Arabs.
That's so that's with yes, Yoni.
Can I give a few remarks about what my colleague, my friend Pinhas said? I disagree with Pinhas about a few points in his presentations. I think that it's too early to say that the Israeli Arabs are out of the game this time in this war. So far, they've been acting very good and keeping themselves out of what we saw on May 2021, the Guardian of the Walls operation of the IDF. And this is something that is very important, and I hope that they will keep doing that. But we have to wait and see what will happen in the Arab sector in Israel when the ground attack, the IDF ground attack, will begin in Gaza, and the IDF will invade Gaza and stay there for a few months. This will be the real test, and we'll see how they perform. So I would wait with giving them grades so far. The second remark is about the Hamas attack and massacre in the Jewish communities on the border with Gaza. They specifically were aimed against Jews, and you can listen in the videos, the video clips. You can hear them using the word Jews, and also the Shin Bet published yesterday a phone call from one of the terrorists calling his parents in Gaza from a mobile phone that he took from one of the people that he killed, Israelis that he killed, and joyfully telling his parents in Gaza that he killed the Jews, 10 Jews that he killed, and their parents. You can hear them in Arabic blessing him and very happy. You can hear the cheering up and very happy that he killed the Jews. So we have to stress this fact. This is done. This was a massacre in the Jews, exactly maybe like the massacre that Prophet Muhammad, his followers, did to the Jewish tribes hundreds of years ago. I think that there's something very interesting about this attack of Hamas. If you compare it to 2021 attack, even though the military massacre of Hamas is called in Arabic Tawfan al-Aqsa, the flood of Al-Aqsa, you can see that it got nothing to do with the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And if we compare it to the war in 2021 in the Guardian of the Walls, the Al-Aqsa Mosque was a major factor in what happened, and the Hamas attack with rockets on Jerusalem was because of what happened in Al-Aqsa. And this was fuel for the Israeli Arabs to participate in the riots and to go into the riots, because this is something that is very sensitive to the Muslims in Israel as other Muslims. And now maybe because the Al-Aqsa Mosque is not in the picture, maybe it's something also that is affecting the Israeli Arabs.
Okay, I would like. Okay,
that's a very interesting observation, Yoni. Really, that on the one hand, Hamas's fake focus on Al-Aqsa as a means to garner international Muslim support for this ISIS-like terrorism, and on the other hand, the Israeli Arabs saying, well, we've seen through that fake attempt and really staying out of the fight, understanding that it wouldn't be in their best interests in any way, shape, or form to get involved in this one. I just have to say, just recently, for all those who are watching, one of the constant tension points in the previous cycles of violence, before it was cycles of violence, now it's a war. One of the constant sources of tension and really sites of conflict was around Jerusalem, and surrounding the Temple Mount. That is definitely something which we haven't seen until now. And let's hope that situation stays. I want to, with your permission, gentlemen, just move away from internal stuff now. What's going on in Lebanon? What are the Lebanese people thinking, Pinhas? Are they ready for Hezbollah to drag the country into another massive war and to face large-scale demolition and destruction also in Lebanon? What's going on there? What are they saying to Hezbollah?
Okay, you cannot say to Hezbollah anything because you are going to be murdered on the spot.
Clearly. But what are they saying anyway?
Okay. What I notice in Lebanon now is a sense of panic. There is a move of emigration out of Lebanon. Lebanese are flying out of the country. I see a movement of citizens from South Lebanon up to the north, fearing that Israel will destroy the villages near the borders. So I cannot notice any support to Hezbollah, encouraging Hezbollah, okay, hit the Jews, but what I notice is panic and movement of people like Gaza, like Israel, now in Lebanon, what happened in Syria before. What we can see now is the spread of the Arab Spring, now a spread to Lebanon and to Israel. This is by large what we are witnessing this day, including the movement of people. Now, when we are talking about movement of people, a major issue that is frightening the Palestinians is another Nakba. Now, I read two articles of Hani El-Masri, who is representing the mood in Ramallah. And the title of his last article is, "We shall keep now the sumud for victory." Sumud means to be passive, not to be active, not to join a Hamas call to attack the Israelis. No, keep sumud, stand fast in your place, okay? Because what they see in Gaza and what they saw in Syria before is a new Nakba. The Palestinians in Gaza are moving from the north to the south, and exactly what happened to them in 48, and now all the refugee camps in Syria are empty. No refugees all the refugee camps in Syria are destroyed,
but not by us. That had nothing to do with us. They were destroyed as part of the internal Syrian civil war, right?
Of course. Yes. Nevertheless, now the term Nakba returned to the common language. Now they talk again about Nakba. What they see in Gaza,
they call it tahjir. That means transfer. Tahjir.
Yes, but read Hani El-Masri. He speaks about Nakba. Now, of course, Hamas does not want to be labeled as creating Nakba, but tahjir. Tahjir means that Israel is creating them to emigrate. But you read Hani El-Masri, he speaks about Nakba. And in order to avoid another Nakba, please stand fast. Don't do anything. Wait. This means that the call of Muhammad Deif to the Palestinians in the West Bank to storm Israel got a negative response in the West Bank because the Nakba. And this is I think that this is the name of the game now. avoiding Nakba, because this is what we see in Gaza now, and this is what we want to avoid in the West Bank.
So when the Palestinians talk about Nakba is a term that, when translated to English, means catastrophe. It's the term that the Palestinians use to describe the creation of the state of Israel, and the start of their alleged catastrophe. So here, really what we're seeing is a lot of parallels. The Arabs refuse to accept Israel's very existence. They attack, pillage, murder, and then when Israel defends itself, they then cry, "Oh, it's a catastrophe." That's a repeat performance that we're seeing at the moment. But what I don't understand, gentlemen, is how that fits into this picture of, well, what's going on in Judea and Samaria that would give them cause to think that this is going to be another Nakba. What's going through their mind? Because at the moment in Israel what Israel is doing in Judea and Samaria is arresting terrorists. There's no active call for people to leave their homes or to move out. The call even to the Gazans to move south wasn't designed to remove them from the area for eternity, but rather to ensure their safety as part of Israel's fight against terror. So what
is happening?
What are these pictures that they're conjuring up for themselves?
What is happening in Judea and Samaria is the IDF is conducting a big clampdown on all of the Hamas leaders and the Hamas activists and terrorists. And the local leaders of Hamas in Judea and Samaria were arrested, 40, 50 people already. I'm talking about the field commanders, and there will be...
Yoni, like I said in the update to start with, according to IDF figures, there have been 930 arrests of terrorists in Judea and Samaria since the 7th of October. Of them, 560 were Hamas terrorists.
Yes, but I'm talking about the leaders, not about the terrorists. The leaders, the thousands of them, the important ones will go to administrative detention at least for a year. I don't know what Israelis are planning to do with them. I hope that they will deport them. They shouldn't be in Israeli jail. Maybe Hamas will demand their release in some sort of exchange of prisoners. I don't know what will happen to them. But I think that the IDF now is waking up. This thing should have been done a long time ago. And I think that the terrorists in the West Bank, they are now holding their terror activities. It's small, low profile, because they are waiting to see what will happen with the ground attack of Israel. They are afraid that if Israel will invade Gaza, there will be a big momentum, and the IDF will go into Jenin refugee camp and Nablus refugee camps like Balata and other refugee camps in the area, and Tulkarem refugee camp, and will take advantage of the shock of the Palestinians from the ground attack in Gaza to also launch a big attack on the refugee camps in Judea and Samaria. I think they are waiting, and so everything now is on a low profile in Judea and Samaria.
And what was the term that they're using? Tahjir?
Tahjir.
Okay, thank you. Let's just go to some of the...
IDF can perform those arrestations because the population is relatively quiet. Because imagine that the Palestinians in the West Bank were listening to Muhammad Deif and revolt against Israel and coming in masses to the street in huge demonstrations. It was much more difficult for the IDF to perform those arrestations. It is possible because the Palestinians are not cooperative with Hamas in this regard. You can speak about the danger coming from Hamas, from the movement of Hamas, but the Palestinians are not creating the obstacles, the problems for IDF to go ahead with the arrestations.
That is, of course, because the Palestinian Authority is more afraid of Hamas than they do love Israel. They're happy for Israel to do their dirty work and arrest the Hamas terrorists. Let's just go through some of our questions. We have a number of questions. Lise Colson, now a regular viewer, asked about the potential for weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons in the tunnel network. I'll go through the questions and then we can deal with them. In the tunnel networks in Gaza. A message for you, Pinhas, from Judith, who says that she's a Middle East specialist and that Daesh has made a number of declarations calling for Jews to be killed just in the last few days, just to bring that to your attention. And the other questions are already describing what is the situation with the different groups in Judea and Samaria, the different terrorist groups that we can touch on in just a second. Yoni, what do we think? Is there an understanding that Hamas will surprise us with weapons of an irregular nature in the tunnels? Is there an estimation or an estimate that they have any type of chemical weapons?
Yes, it's very possible. If you listen to what Hamas is saying from even beginning of the war, they're always saying that they have weapons that they haven't been using until now, and they will use them for the first time in the war against Israel. And this will be a big surprise. That is something that we have to take into consideration. I think that the IDF is aware of it, and I wouldn't be surprised if the IDF will surprise Hamas, and use very special means. I cannot go into the details for obvious reasons, but there are ways also to surprise Hamas that is hiding in the tunnels.
I think that could be a very dangerous development here as we go along, to see the use of even the defense against those types of weapons. But if we're talking about Hamas, ISIS, it's something which clearly should and does need to be taken into account. So that's something that we'll have to wait and see how that develops.
And also, one of the surprises that they are talking about, and I tweeted it. If you go to my Twitter account, you can see that I tweeted it a few days ago. One of the surprises is that they are going to attack Tamar gas rig in the Mediterranean. They are planning to attack this gas rig with missiles, and they have they've developed special small submarines that can commit suicide attacks on the gas rig. They've tried to do that also in the 2021 in the Guardian of the Wall operation, but the Israeli army thwarted these attempts. But I'm sure they will try to do it again.
That I can say is definitely something which Israel has taken into account. I can say from a really first-hand knowledge of the security provisions around the gas platforms, and also preparing for the different threats. In one of my previous incarnations, I was in charge of the legal advice to Israel's Navy. When just after the gas were discovered and the platform started coming up. So I have a little bit of information and background on that, but obviously this isn't the place or time to get into that to help our enemies. Just to wrap up, a brief description of the different groups and forces on the Palestinian side who are acting in Judea and Samaria, and the reflection also on Gaza. If I may, gentlemen, I'll just run through this quickly, and you can correct me where necessary. As opposed to Gaza, where Gaza is predominantly run by Hamas, the areas in Judea and Samaria that are under the ostensibly the control of the Palestinian Authority, they're more controlled by Fatah, which is the party of Yasser Arafat, Mahmoud Abbas, and that whole milieu of different terrorists, but the same idea, but the terrorists in suits that claim to be more moderate than the other terrorists. Then alongside them, you have Hamas that is constantly operating. Hamas was, even in Judea and Samaria, Hamas won the elections in 2006. In Ramallah, the stronghold of Fatah, Hamas even then won the majority of votes, and that is probably what we would continue to see. We've seen the developments in the northern areas of Samaria, in Jenin, in Shechem, where Hamas forces together with Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is another terrorist group that is also operating both in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria, we're joining forces to fight against the Fatah groups, and then you have within that the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. They're really the communists, terrorists, rejectionists of the Oslo Peace Accords, members of the PLO headed by Mahmoud Abbas. He has a member group that's called the PFLP that are responsible for multiple terror attacks. They were responsible for the August 2019 murder of Rina Schnurb and the injury of her father, Rav Eitan, and her brother Dvir. And they now also participated in the infiltration from Gaza and are now also one of the groups holding terrorists. I think those are the four main groups that are running around in Judea and Samaria. I think they're the biggest groups. Gentlemen, correct me if I'm wrong, just as we wrap up for the day.
I would like to be more specific.
Go on.
There is a difference between Jenin, Nablus, Bethlehem, and Hebron. In Jenin, we have a coalition of Rock Fatah that does not obey Abu Mazen, that is linked with Hamas and Islamic Jihad, while the strongest group there is Islamic Jihad. Now, the one who is operating this Jenin coalition is Salah Haruri from Lebanon. Now, in Nablus, Salah Haruri from Lebanon, yes, together with Hezbollah. You have here a pro-Iranian coalition, including Fatah, Islamic Jihad, Hamas of Haruri, and there is no Hezbollah there, but that's enough. Now, in Nablus, you have the Fatah mafia, the Tanzim, it's mafia. They deal with crimes, okay? And they give themselves a nationalistic aroma in order to be accepted by the population, but they do not accept them. Now, the people of the city of Nablus are suffering a lot from the Tanzim of Balata, and they are not accepted by Nablus, and they forced by the PA, by the governor of the PA, to accept the Balata Tanzim. Now in Bethlehem, we have the Fatah of the Bedouin of the Amarne, I forgot the name, Ta'amre. Those are Bedouins also with the title of Fatah and Tanzim, etc. But again, the deal with what Bedouins are dealing, smuggling and crimes, etc. Hebron is separated from the rest of the West Bank. They are more linked to Jordan. They have a strong Hamas presence there, but the Hamas presence there in Hebron is obeying the big Hamulas, the big tribes. So the city of Hebron is managing itself, including the problem of Hamas and the bad guys of Fatah.
And on that optimistic note
of the West Bank.
On that optimistic note, and really understanding the differences between Judea and Samaria, and where even where the PA has control and where it doesn't have control, that's where we need to wrap up for today. Again, join us tomorrow at 4 o'clock Israel time, we are trying to bring you the best analysis that we can provide to understand and better understand what's going on, both in the war specifically with Gaza and the Gaza and Judea and Samaria terrorists, and then on the northern front, and with that bigger picture. We'll be back with you. You can go onto our website and see all of the previous daily briefings from the start of the war, and more analysis that is there. As you can see behind me, jcpa.org. That's our address. Please join us if you have questions. Please feel free to send them either to myself, Maurice, Maurice at jcpa.org, or to info.jcpa.org. We look forward to you joining us tomorrow. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time and for your explanations, and keep safe.